With more, I want to bring in Marc Faber. He's the editor of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom report. He joins us right now live on the telephone. Mark, just last week you told us that this all unrest across the world was going to spill into the United States. That's what's happening. We've got two ways to go here. On the one hand, the U.S., it spills into the U.S., and we've got a sizable decline to come. On the other hand, where do you put your money? I mean, if you're seeing unrest all around the world, wouldn't it make sense that the U.S., given the stability here relative to the rest of the world, is the one place that you buy at some point this week?
Well, I have this to say about markets. They have become very oversold near term and medium term. Long term, if you look at the, say, 20-year chart of the S&P, the recent decline hardly shows up. But it can get much worse. And let me remind your viewers that the day before the market crashed in October 1987, the market was also already oversold. And then the Dow dropped 21% in one day. So unusual things can happen when the goal of the authorities is to reduce some risk through central banking and monetary policies and the fiscal policies. Then these suppressed risks come back one day as a systemic risk. And this is what may happen now. I believe the markets are oversold. What you should do with the money is, whereas most investors were always buying the dips, I would consider on any rebound reducing positions, because the slowdown in China began more than 2 years ago, and it began to accelerate on the downside last year while the stock market was doubling. And we have now hit in the Chinese economy kind of a brick wall. And this will have a big impact on the world, on multinationals that, in the case, say, of General Motors, derive 35% of their sales from China.
Right. So just to be clear, Mark, are you saying to buy on the dip?
No, I'm not saying buy on the dip. I'm saying sell on the rebound.
Into strength.
Okay, sell into strength.
Yes. And concerning what you do with your money, you should keep cash.
Mark,
and as I said before, treasury bonds in the U.S., they are okay. But I don't particularly like the U.S. dollar.
Mark, this is John Hilsenrath. I remember sitting in your office in 1998 talking about all the storms brewing in Asia and how they were affecting the rest of the world. I want to ask you, does what you're seeing now in China and Asia more broadly remind you at all of how things played out in the late 90s? And how does that affect your investment strategy? What we ended up with then was a technology bubble.
Well, basically in 98, we had already the Asian crisis, and stocks in Asia became incredibly cheap. We haven't that yet. Stocks have declined, and they're not terribly expensive anymore if you adjust for the weakness of the currencies and so on. But they're not bargain levels like they were in 98, 99. And what is different this time is that the Asian economies, by and large, have still trade and current account surpluses with few exceptions. That wasn't the case at that time. On the other hand, as you know, in 1999-2000, the U.S. government debt was $5 trillion. Now it's $18 trillion. Debt as a percent of GDP everywhere has been going through the roof. In China, since 2009, debt as a percent of the GDP is up 80%. So we live in a very leveraged world, and we have had zero interest rates since 2009.
Right.
In 98, 2000, Greenspan, he could reduce the Fed fund rate from 6.5% to 1% in 2003. But that is no longer possible.
Mark, where would rates be without the Federal Reserve suppression of rates? If the markets were allowed to be more natural, where do you think the overnight rates would be right now?
Well, the Taylor rule would suggest that, say, the Fed fund rate should be around 1.5–2%.
So do you think this changes the Fed's course next month?
My belief is that the weakness that is now obvious even to some professors at the Fed,
right,
who've never been to China and never traveled and don't know anything about economics, that this weakness will induce them not to increase interest rates.
Okay, so you're not expecting a move next month. And John, you said that the markets are now pricing in March 16.
The markets are. I'm not saying that that's what the Fed has decided,
right.
but it certainly reduces the odds.
It's at 28% for September now, the futures market.
Marc Faber, thank you. Yeah,
John,
go ahead, Mark.
We should get together one of these days.
For sure.
You know, a
I
big
can
shot
see it.
at the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, but why don't you, when you're next in New
visit.
York, please call us, Mark. And we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Marc
Okay.
Faber joining us, Gloom, Doom,
Bye-bye.
and
Take care.
Boom Report.
Bye-bye.